Welcome to Swimmed, education for coaches, swimmers, and parents.
The only podcast dedicated to club swimming. Let's dive in.
I don't even know how to start this. It's been so long since we've had an actual podcast because the Olympic coverage took so much time.
I know.
Yes, loved it. That was great. It was a lot of fun. But by the 10th day of recording, I was like, okay.
I was over it.
I was over it. I was over it. I mean, the last day was exciting, right? So that was
doing
really
it
fun.
on vacation, I think, is what got me. That I was like, nope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the funny thing is we did that coverage. I was at the zones meet. I was at my brother's wedding. You were on vacation at times. It was not like, hey, let's just go record because we're in town. We were all over the place.
Yeah.
So, but it was a lot of fun. Like I enjoyed it an awful lot. And now you're starting your season back up, right?
Yeah. So we started on Monday and it's been mind-numbing but good. Lots of new kids.
How much have you grown this year?
Well, so I've always explained that I believe in quality over quantity. So I always limit how many we have no matter what, because I don't want lane space to get to the point where there's just a massive amount of kids. So we're up to 120.
Good. That's a nice.
It was about a 25% growth. And that's not me fully utilizing my other pool yet. So it's good. I've got a staff member came back that I absolutely love. She moved back into town. So that's like very energizing to me. She's awesome. So I've got her on staff now, and I moved around some of my staff members to different groups than they were on last year that they're all actually really enjoying and are kind of renewed themselves. So I split my senior group up, that it's still a senior group, but there's a I would say more focused senior group that's looking at college swimming, etc. And then my other section of seniors that are just either new to senior group or they are just there to stay in shape, do good in high school swimming.
Right.
So that's been really nice too, that it's more of like a focused perspective. So it's always the get through the first week. If you just survive the first week. So
my first week is next week when we start classes here at the university, and it's just going to be kids, students trying to find their classrooms, getting the first lecture out of the way, that, and there's a lot of energy that goes along with it because everybody's excited. Even the professors are excited, but then you got to get into the grind mode. Like the honeymoon season has to be over and just get back into normalcy. And so I think that's pretty good. So I also think that putting coaches in new groups with new swimmers is scary. It's like, oh, but I have this relationship with these swimmers. I want to stay with them. But it just rejuvenates because now you're writing different kinds of workouts and looking for different kinds of, it's not the same old, same old. The old saying is in teaching, I get older, but the kids stay the same.
Yeah.
Because it's like the students stay the same age because it's just replenishing. As it were.
I think I'm really lucky because, we say this all the time that I really listen. I sit down before the season starts and I really listen to my staff and the suggestions that they have and the feedback that they have. And I always make sure that my parents, even the first week, the very first email I send out is, I need you all to understand the very first week is us feeling everybody out, making sure that the groups are going to work the way they are. So I need you to be patient.
Right.
I need you to be respectful of the staff. And I need you to understand that we might have initially placed your swimmer in one group, but if that looks like it's not going to benefit them, we might be moving them the first week. Right. So please have that in mind, that this is not a permanent situation. We've got to make sure everybody's going to be where they need to be in order for that to work. And I'm always that way with my staff too, because even though I think that one thing may work, they might get through 3 days of this and be like, Jen, like this is not
me.
Yeah. And again, that's okay. I'm lucky because again, my staff has been with me for as long as they've had. So they've gotten to see how each group really works and what their passion is. Right. So I think everybody is finally in the spot that they're really energized and ready to go. And it's allowed me to, you know, be with the upper level kids that need the extra push. My practices went from last year with the senior group being 2 hours to now it's 3 hours
Oh,
a
gee whiz.
day because we added dry land in and like weightlifting dry land, not like go outside with med balls and do
Right, right,
body
right.
stuff like because most of these swimmers again are developed and they're in that stage where they're like sectionals, futures, juniors, so they need that part of it. So we're going from that to this. So I've taken on more this
Right.
year, but it's in a good way because, you know, again, you really have to compartmentalize the swimmers that you've got and where they're at, and that can change from year to year. And so the team has just grown to this point that we're now at this point where that's what needed to happen for the team to progress forward where it needs to go.
Well,
So
that's good.
yeah, so I only got 3 more days at the end of the week.
Yeah, and then you can recover just a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's always tough at the beginning. My son just started swimming this year.
I know this is crazy.
So history behind this is he tried swimming a couple years ago and liked it while he was like kicking with like the senior group and I was coaching, but
Yeah.
then he just kind of got away from it. And he loves to go, we go on long bike rides. But this summer we went on a long bike ride and he was just like, Daddy, it's too hot. I'm too sweaty. Like, I don't, I go, well, what are you going to do? And I came home. My wife's like, he's going to swim now. I'm like, he's going to swim now. And like, yeah, he said it's cooler in the pool. And I was like, yes, it is. So he had to wait until this last Monday to get started. And he's gone for a couple of days and he loves it. But yesterday was a challenge for him. I asked him, I said, what's your favorite part? He goes, social kick. Now I was like, because you like to talk, like you're my son. You definitely like to talk. And then
Yeah.
yesterday I showed up on deck and I'm allowed on deck because I'm still, a coach with the team on paper at least. And so I get there and they're doing a donut relay, right? So they're sprinting to the other end. You got to shove a donut in your mouth and then the next person goes. And I said, what was your favorite part? He's like, not the donut relay. And I said, what are you talking about? He's like, well, it was so good going down, but then I didn't feel so good. I was like, that's the whole point of the donut
Yeah.
relay. So it was pretty good. It was pretty good. It's good to see that. So today we want to talk about dolphin kicks because I think this was the biggest. It was the
Yay.
planned. I think it was planned to be the biggest takeaway from the Olympics because every race that I watched at the Olympics, it was the third turn off the 200 or let's watch this underwater. And yes, they want to take advantage of their coverage of their underwater cameras, but it was the
Right.
same thing over and over again. And we even discussed in our coverage, if anybody wants to go back and watch it, how much better the US was in the underwaters, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
So,
by far. Absolutely by far.
right,
They, you know, and I thought, and we said this in our broadcast again, if you go back and watch it, that I thought it was so interesting the different types of body frames of their trajectory off of the wall with the dolphin
how
kicks.
deep they went and how,
Yeah, like how arched they were or how deep they went or if they were flatter or it was just really interesting to watch the variations of what worked for the different bodies and not just the male to female, but even like male to male and female to female
right,
because I think it showed how, based upon your body type of where your strength is, whether it's core, whether it's your legs, they went at it from very different angles.
right,
And Rowdy Gaines and Michael Phelps actually even talked about the fact of, because the pool was a little bit more shallow, that some of them even changed it just from what they normally did on their own
right,
because the pool was different than what they were, technically used to with a much deeper pool that their trajectory even changed based upon that. So, I mean, it was very little changes that they did, but I thought it was amazing how time and time again we were watching that they would go into the wall on the turn, side by side with somebody and come up and they were half a body length ahead when they
exactly,
were off. And it
right,
was over and over. It wasn't like it was one or two people that we were used to that we know have amazing dolphin kicks. It was everybody
right.
doing it.
So the
So
question, so the one clarification I want to make there is my thought process. You said there that they changed like they changed the way that they kick off the wall
yeah,
because of the pool. It's not because, okay, so I think a lot of the times we think about it as depth, right?
right,
So if we're used to swimming on the edges of a pool that are 8 feet that goes down to 9 feet, and this is 7 feet across, well, the depth, if I go my normal depth, there's still room for me, right?
right,
It's not like I go in down and kick 1 foot off the bottom on a 9 foot pool on a regular basis.
yeah,
But that's not what we're talking about, because in that case, you're thinking from the top surface of the water down, this is how deep I want to go. The swimmers, from their perspective, remember, it's from the bottom of the pool up.
right,
So if they're used to being 3 feet off the bottom of the water, naturally they're going to be 3 feet off the bottom of the water.
yep,
And that's what their perception is going to be. So then as they kick off the wall and they go and they do their underwater kicks, now they're close to the surface. So what kind of changes do you have to make sure that you're still out at 15 meters? Well, maybe it's being more parallel with the bottom of the pool for a longer period of time, or kicking, you have to kick harder because you're coming up a little bit,
right.
and so I mean, I think that um that's the change that had to be made. It's not
Yeah.
because of the how deep I want to be, it's how far from the bottom that I have to be, and how that changes how deep and where I push off.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll go into this next to the history of dolphin kicks, but the reality of it is that one of the reasons that people started doing this was because you were able to get underneath a lot of the wake of your competitors and avoid the wake that was on top and the waves and everything. So you figure, there's less depth of that pool for that to be absorbed.
Right.
So you have to change how you're coming off of the wall. So a lot of that to me as a coach is genuinely the actual push off of the turn, because you can push off of a flip turn. You can go deeper, you can go shallower, depending upon where you place your feet, how your back is arched, all of those things. So, a lot of the reasons that we're doing the dolphin kicks the way that we are is to try and get underneath that wake to come up in fresh, clean water. That's just one of the many reasons. But that was part of it too, is when the pool is more shallow, the wake, the waves, all of that changes.
Right.
So that's also one of the reasons why they were changing what they were doing based upon that. But let's start with explaining where dolphin kicks came from. So
Okay.
let's start with the very, very, very beginning of these. Who came up with
Well,
so
let's start with the beginning of swimming. Let's go all the way back, because when we both started looking at the history of the underwater dolphin kick and the legislation and everything that came up, I was really hit again the development of strokes and the lawlessness that we used to swim in up until like the 1960s. So
right?
basically, again, if you look at swimming, 1900s there was breaststroke, and then we got freestyle and backstroke added in 1952. They split butterfly and breaststroke because they were the same stroke at the time, with
Yep,
over the water recovery of the arms with the breaststroke kick. So they
right.
allowed the dolphin kick. That's where the first time a dolphin kick was allowed in, was
Yep,
1952, because people were experimenting with it, but it wasn't a legal stroke. Now it became a legal stroke, right? And so you start going through, but at that point you could go underwater as long as you wanted,
right.
because the prevailing thought at the time is underwater is slow because there's more resistance,
Yep.
and you have to hold your breath, so there's oxygen deprivation. Therefore, it's better to be on top of the water. And we see this all the way up until 1988. This is the ongoing debate. But in the 1970s, that's when we have the first. You can take it from here. This is when we had the first time that somebody really tried to work their underwaters.
Right. So it was an American who actually did it, and he was doing like 2 to 3 underwater dolphin kicks off of his start.
Right.
Um, the guy's name was Jesse Veloso. I don't know if we're pronouncing that right.
Yeah, it's Veloso.
Um,
That's fine.
but again, it goes back to he was trying to avoid waves off
Right.
of his competitors, so he would stay underwater longer to get out underneath and then go. So that was, the first person that ever really did it. And then the interesting part was I think this is cool because we just got done with the Olympics. The next guy was a backstroker from Japan, and he was doing like full-fledged for as long as he possibly could underwater.
Yeah, that's
So
Suzuki, right?
yeah, so it wasn't just 3 or 4 dolphin kicks. It was him trying to go the full length of the pool. And, but no one really knew about it because he didn't make finals doing it at the Olympics. So it wasn't really like advertised so much. The coaches saw it, but it wasn't something that was very, very popular because he
Well,
didn't make the finals. He didn't win. So people were thinking, okay, well, if he didn't make finals doing it, then it can't be that fast.
right.
Um,
And that's where, so it started in 1980 with him, and he didn't make, and then 84 he didn't make finals. So put yourself in the place, right? Alasso, he starts off and he's only going under the wake and then he's coming up. So people are like, that makes sense. We can start going, and you'll see like some of the coverage, even in the 1988, they go almost 5 meters, maybe 6 or 7 meters.
yep,
And they go under a wake, and that's it. That's as far
yep,
as they go. Because the one guy, Dashi Suzuki, he is saying I can go a lot faster and better at it, but he can never prove it. Where if I'm thinking it's oxygen deprivation, it's too much energy, it's really not efficient. It's all of these different reasons that coaches are pulling and swimmers are pulling out to say it's not going to work because of this or because of this or because of this. And then when you
yep,
bring it to the big meets, it doesn't work. They can say, see, it doesn't work, and they move on.
right.
Even though it's right in front of your face, we weren't to the place, that tipping point, where suddenly we see a result that says, oh, wait a minute, you can do it at the highest level. Yeah, you can do it at NCAA's short course, or you can do it in high school, or you can do it at short course meters, right? And there can be a change there. It wasn't like he
Yeah,
wasn't fast. It
yeah.
just, he can never prove it. He can never get over that bump or that hump or that tipping point where he could say, this is the future. This is what we need to do.
Yeah. And I mean, I want to point out too to everyone because we live in the time that we do. I mean, back then, they did not have the technology that we do to know that this actually was faster. Because
Yes.
if they had the technology that we do this day and age with underwater cameras and the timing systems we have and the things that we have now, they would have very instantly figured out, oh my gosh, this is actually way faster. But we're looking at a time when those things didn't exist. So it really was up to the human eye and the science that we had at the time
Right.
saying, you're taking oxygen away from your muscles. There wasn't enough technology to prove that. And until someone broke through that was genuinely strong enough, let's just be honest, was strong enough to be able to do this to get faster. It really was just a normal human's observation of, well, this isn't going to work.
Right.
So,
And I think that there's a lot of fads you're going to hear, and I think this is really important for parents and athletes. There are going to be fads that come through that you're going to hear about and go, oh, that could be the future. Oh, this could be the future. Oh, that could be the
yeah,
future, right? Michael Andrew, for example, this could be the future. And his dad was pushing it out. There's teams in the Midwest that are pushing it out and saying, this is going to be the future. This is where it is. But it's never gotten over the tipping point where you could say outside of 100 or a 50, is it really going to work for training for you? And it doesn't,
yeah,
and maybe we change the science and the way that they did it in the future, but don't get caught up in, I don't want this to come across as we should have known better, go
yeah,
with every fad because it could be the next dolphin kick. It's
right,
probably not going to be.
correct.
There's only a few of these kind of breakthroughs because, as we'll see in a second, it changes all the rules.
Yeah,
The Wild
yeah,
West is over, right?
yeah,
So, anyways, Suzuki goes into the 88 Olympics and the backstroke, and he is going after it. And there's an American at the time, Burkhoff, who's also using the underwater dolphin kicks an awful lot. And
yep,
Burkhoff is going 35 to 40 meters underwater on the first 50 of a 200 backstroke and the
right,
100 backstroke.
Right.
and he would go between 30 and 35 for the next two 50s and then only 25 on the last 50 and then come up and swim. Suzuki is doing a little bit less distance, but doing similarly and ends up out touching him. There's a Russian that gets in there too. Burkhoff gets the bronze. So now you don't have just an Olympic gold medalist who utilizes past 15 meters underwater. You have a bronze medalist that's doing it as well, and you have a Russian that's trying to do it. I haven't gone back and watched the film. I don't know how far he's going, but the gold and the bronze definitely are. And so
Right.
now it's here. Now we've hit the tipping point. Now we got to start focusing on the underwaters.
Yep. Correct. And, it's funny because again, during the Olympics, Rowdy actually mentions numerous times Burkoff that,
Well, why is that? Why would he mention Burkhoff?
yeah, well, well, why would he, Matt? I don't
Well,
know.
maybe his daughter is a backstroker too,
Correct.
and she is going after some medals as well in the 200 backstroke and did pretty well for herself.
Yes, she did. So, I think it's just the coolest part about this is, and I highly recommend everyone, especially swimmers, going and looking this up of what we're talking about and reading it for yourself to understand how this all, evolved from there. But, once that really happened, I think is when, like you said, everything took off. And then all of a sudden we started seeing all of the coaches and the swimmers really training it. The first female that comes to mind is Misty Hyman.
Yes.
That, that was a big deal because up until that point, it was really backstrokers that were doing it. And then all of a sudden we started seeing, butterflyers and freestylers, that it wasn't just backstrokers that it was
Yes.
happening to, that it started infiltrating everything as we went along. So, I mean, I think a big thing is to go and watch the films, like you said, because when you watch Missy Hyman's race from during the 1990s, any ones that she was doing,
Right.
was crazy to see how far they were going, what they were doing. So let's talk about.
Well, before we go there, hold on a second,
Yeah.
because one thing that I found that was really interesting for
Yeah.
me was the 1996 Summer Olympics,
Hmm.
right? Because I mean, you and I are alive for that. Some of our listeners might not have been, but they
Yeah.
were still going in the 200 butterfly and the 100 butterfly. They were going 35 meters underwater because the
Correct.
rule changes.
Yep.
Okay, so the rule changes were different. So Missy Hyman in 1996 goes out and she can kick underwater as far as she wants. They changed the rules in 1997, 2000. Watch the 2,200 butterfly race, and you can see O'Neill from Australia kicking out and doing 4 or 5 dolphin kicks and coming up around 8 to 10 meters out. And Missy Hyman's right at the 15-meter mark. And that's how she gets ahead on every single wall and wins the gold medal. So,
Yep.
all of these innovations happen, but legislation happens. And you can see this is the one chance you really get to see the adaptation by a swimmer who was really long underwater, shorten it up, but staying right at the rules and using that to the advantage. Where FINA, I think, thought if we stop it at 15 meters, then we're going to equalize the swimming, and it's not.
Yep.
It still
Yeah.
has to have the innovation because the
Yeah.
rule changes were 1990, 1988 after the Summer Olympics with Suzuki and Burkhoff. They say 10 meters.
Yeah.
You can only go 10 meters. Well,
Right.
that was revised in 1991 after a bunch of people said, hey, we need a little bit farther. So they went 15 meters.
Yep.
And then in 1997, that's when they changed for freestyle and butterfly is the 15-meter mark. Breaststroke is the
Yep.
only stroke that doesn't have the 15-meter mark. But another interesting thing is back in the 1950s or 60s, there was a Japanese swimmer, I think it was Japanese, that would swim underwater pullouts for as
Oh,
long as he could in the 100
yeah.
and the 200 breaststroke.
Yeah.
And so they said at that point, the first underwater legislation was breaststroke, where you can only do one underwater pull out before your head has to break the surface, and that
Right.
kind of quelled that motion that was there. So I mean,
Yeah.
looking at the history of swimming is exciting. Like it's a lot of fun, and if you put it with with going back and when they mention a race, go back and watch the race. It really will teach you an awful lot because also Missy Hyman was on her side more
Yep.
because she said she got a better feel for that. So we would teach on the side more. Now it's pretty flat. So, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that there's a lot there. And then you have the Ryan Lochte rule, right? Where
Yeah.
he would
Yeah.
push off on his back after going from breast to freestyle. And they're like, you have to be on your stomachs. So all of these rule changes there's reasons for it.
Right. Right. And I mean, just this past Olympics, I think that we we saw those rule changes very much
Yes.
impact a lot of races, that happen. We know with Alex Walsh, the being on the side thing, that's what got her the DQ. There was, I think it was a Canadian that went past 15
She
and
didn't get called. It was the British guy that got called.
right, right. The British, that's right. It was the British guy that got called, but going past 15. And, and I have to mention this because it's gonna make coaches laugh and we all know it. Like when you've got, especially when your swimmers are older swimmers and they get really good at these dolphin kicks, it's kind of a joke on the pool deck when they don't have enough officials and there's no one standing at the 15-meter
Yeah, you
mark.
let it rip.
And you're like, oh, we're clear. and
So
and that even as coaches, like, I mean, I don't know if you've ever fought it, but I've definitely fought it that like if there is not an official
yes,
standing at the 15-meter mark and they try and call it that and they're not close to it, I mean, I will fight that every single time and be like, you
yes.
were not in line with it. So there is no way for you to know that that is where that marker is at, that they were right at it or not. So,
Yeah, but I mean, if my swimmer goes 20 meters,
oh yeah, for
yeah, then
sure.
you're I mean, it's got to be a close call. You know
Yeah,
what I
right.
mean?
It's got to be close. And and it's funny because during summer league, it's my swimmers, a lot of them will test it because there's not a lot of summer league like officials that know what to do with that.
Right.
And they'll go as far as they can with it. So it's very just fun to watch kids when they finally figure out how to utilize this properly,
Right.
because even swimmers will sit there during practice when we're working on, kicking, and I'll now have to reverse myself, that I'll have to say, you get 4 dolphin kicks and then come up,
Right.
because we could be doing a set and they'll, and they're supposed to be swimming, they're supposed to be pacing or doing whatever. And when they get really good at them, they will stay underwater for this exact reason for as long as they possibly can if it's not restricted. So, it goes back to we've discovered that this is faster, and for most swimmers when you do it all the time, it's easier than being on top of the water and swimming. You
Yes.
are faster when you are under.
Yes.
So, that's really well that where this all came from. And I think it's been amazing to watch this evolve. I think it's been amazing to watch the really great ones. And give me your opinion on this, Matt. I always feel like backstrokers and butterflyers are the best at these. I think it's just the natural feel that they already have for the water with that rhythm for some reason. And then with butterflyers and then the backstrokers, it seems like it's easier doing it on your back than it is
Yes.
on your stomach. So I love always watching, Ryan Murphy, Gretchen Walsh, and Michael Phelps. I mean, just Michael Phelps's size and how natural it was to him, that keeping his feet together
Right.
is amazing to watch. So what's your opinion on that? Do you think that one stroke executes them better than the other? Do
No, I
you?
think I think you're right about the feel for it. I think backstrokers take advantage of it just because I think historically it's been a backstroke thing. And it does feel different on your back. It feels
Yeah.
like you get more propulsion out of it because the only other thing you can do is freestyle kick on it, whereas a butterflyer has to use dolphin kick to move forward. I think that a couple of things that you were talking about is for short course, we talked about this before, like why is the US so good at underwaters? And why are some of especially the ones that train in the US, why are they so much better at underwaters? Is because if you think about just a normal practice, if you're doing short course 25 yards compared to 50 meters, or
Yep.
short course meters compared to long course meters, you have a lot more opportunities to come off the wall and practice it. So just that by itself is going to be there. But you could say, well, Europeans and Australians, they will practice short course meters. They will do that. So that's kind of a wash. but with we have more meets that are short course because
Correct.
in college you have dual meets, you have tri meets, you have tournament, regular invitational meets, you have conference, you have nationals. You can go to world's short course. So there's a lot of short course. And I think one example that you could look at is Neil Walker versus Lenny Kraselberg. At the time, Neil Walker ate Kraselberg's lunch at NCAA's. Just
Yeah.
absolutely did it. But then this is a four-time, world champion, Olympic champion, Kraselberg, who would win long course meters because he trained long course meters longer in his life. Yes, he was in the U.S. He was living in Southern California. He was training with Aaron Parasol. They were doing all this. But the underwaters that over time, and we swim such a longer short course season in the U.S. and club, you get better at it if you want to use it as a weapon.
Right.
And
Correct.
that's the part that has to get across to everybody is it's a fifth stroke. We call
Yeah.
it the fifth stroke because in some cases, if you're better at underwaters than you are at swimming, short course, you can take it out.
Yeah.
2017, I was at sectionals in South Carolina or North Carolina, and there was like 11, 12, or maybe she was 13-year-old going for a national age group record. 200 backstroke. She swam in almost all underwater. Her
Yeah.
underwater dolphin kicks were phenomenal, and she sets the record because of the underwater. So if you're very good at underwater, I mean, very good at backstroke, but great at underwaters, you get out a body length ahead. You get a
Yeah.
faster time. And so you
Yeah.
have to train it that way, and you have to look at it that way. I got a story for you, though. It came up when you were talking about. So I was at a meet in Columbus, Georgia, and we were working a lot on our underwaters because I was like, I want 4 kicks, dolphin kick, 4 transition kicks before you come up. I really want you working it because then at a race, you might, or 6 if you can really do it. So at a race, it decreases. I'll get 2 or 3 dolphin kicks off the wall, and that's better for the age group swimmers. These are not the top swimmers. These are my age group swimmers. And I
Yeah.
had some, those that were like 13, 14, 15 that I was working with. So I said to him, I'm like, look, and I pull a $5 bill out of my pocket. Whoever gets disqualified for going too far, 15 meters, gets $5. You know what I mean? And so Bella Koyama was her name. And she comes and she just, I go, you got to bring me the slip. And so she does it. I was like, I think she did it. This is like the third day of the meet. As the very end, it was something she didn't even care about. She comes up with a slip, and so I sign it and I give her the $5 and we take a picture together. But it was like the kids were like, "Are you serious about that?" And like, whoever does it gets $5. I want
Yeah.
I want to reward you for something that long term will
Is going to
get you to
benefit.
think about how much faster you can be underwater. And
Yeah.
sometimes you got to do the irrational to kind
Yeah.
of get kids' attentions.
Well, and again, it's funny you say that because I've got a swimmer. He's going to swim for Tampa this year, and 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 he's a butterflyer. I mean,
Right.
he has been a natural butterflyer since he was very little.
So bad.
He's just
That's a
right.
lot of pain.
But I mean, he's always been amazing at it. Well, as we progress and I started coaching him when he was a freshman, I've been developing all of his strokes so it wasn't just butterfly.
Right.
But what he soon realized was because he was so good at butterfly, those dolphin kicks were his secret weapon.
Right.
And he went from really butterfly being his only main events that he was hitting, sectionals and things like that in and winning to all of a sudden when, I threw him in backstroke and was like, look, just get to the 15 every wall. Just
Right.
use them and just get to the 15. And I think it was his second swim, he hit futures and 100 back.
Wow.
Like, and just because he was just, it's dolphins. And then it's a joke with us that when we go to long course, he hates it. He absolutely hates
Yeah,
it
because his superpower is reduced.
because, because then you really
Kryptonite
have
is
to
the
swim.
long course.
Right. And so, walls are his thing and that's his superpower and he's great at them. And, he could just dolphin kick forever on no matter what stroke it is. And then we go to long course. And I mean, probably the biggest torture when I'm saying this for him was that he is a 100% natural butterflyer, but literally to fly long course to him is probably most people it's the worst event in the
Yeah,
world.
it's pretty
To
bad.
fly long course is terrible,
Right.
but that was like death to him because you can't use those dolphin kicks in the same way to get through a two fly short course as you would long course.
Right.
So, it now that he's going to college and swimming in college, it's a joke that he's like, I'm going to be the best 25 butterflyer in the world. and so, and because they don't swim long course, it's
Right.
all short course. It's not even an option. And so, just as you said, those dolphin kicks, we as Americans, our kids starting in summer league swim 25 yards.
Right.
The majority of our pools are 25 yards. So we are constantly, as coaches, as club coaches, working on those dolphin kicks, those walls, the turns, because they start from really 4 years old, swimming summer league most of the time. That is 25 yards until they really graduate. And then they're going to college and
And swimming short
swimming
course.
in yards pools, short course.
Right.
It's even rare for us to have 25-meter pools. There's some that exist, but
Right.
there's not a lot.
Yeah.
Most of our yard pools. So, I think in the development of these dolphin kicks, that is, just as you said, why Americans are so much better at them, because it's something we start at from an extremely young age compared to the rest of the world, that this is how we're brought up.
Right. And that's all. And
So,
it's also hard for Americans to transition to the long course meters, like you were talking about with Jared.
yeah,
It's one of those, every swimmer that comes that's very successful in NCAAs, and then they become a pro and they go into long course meters. Dressel had a hard time. It wasn't instant success because it does change the strategy, the strengths, and what you need to work on, and you've got to build up for what you're swimming at as you go through. So the question is, why is the dolphin kick so much more efficient underwater? Like, what are the mechanics that are happening there? Because I think that if you look at the mechanics of drag and resistance and why it works so well, then you know how to train yourself for it, right?
Correct.
So basically it's common knowledge now. A streamline is very efficient under the water. It breaks through. So what you do is you have different resistance for your body, right? So there's positional resistance, which is like your skin and where your body is in. So if I'm trying to swim uphill, if my butterfly goes from this, which is, parallel with the water, and suddenly I get horizontal where my head is out of the water, like an 8-year-old trying to go a 25. There was a summer league kid that he took 100 strokes in a 25 because he was looking like a seahorse. He was going up and down so much. He never gave up, and he was legal.
Amazing.
It was amazing to watch. And it took me like the first 5 meters. I didn't count. I was like, this is going to take forever. And this kid just kept going. It was amazing. But anyway, so positional resistance, right? There's also, tension in the front. So there's frontal resistance, which is the water is settled, gravity's on it. And so it becomes almost like, think of it like a brick wall that you've got to break through. And once water starts moving, it's easier to move through water. If it's standing still, if it's settled, there is a bigger resistance that is there in front of you. So that's your frontal resistance, right? Or frontal drag, some people will call it. So you have that kind of stuff. Then you also have your eddy, and that's on the back end, and that's going to be your drag. So have you ever had a swimmer where they're kicking freestyle, they're a brand new swimmer, they're on a kickboard, they're kicking freestyle, and they go backwards instead of forwards?
Yeah.
If you've ever seen that, that's the eddy effect, or I like to call it turbulence. Yeah. And what happens is when you add turbulence, it sucks the person backwards. So you have to either be more efficient so you can move forward and overcome the resistance behind you, or your technique gets better so you create less resistance in the back or turbulence in the back. So if you see really good kickers, beginner kickers are really big kick, a lot of turbulence, suck backwards. Great kickers are smaller kicks, more efficient, and they move forward. So they have to overcome the frontal resistance, the eddy resistance, the positional resistance that's on their body, the frictional resistance as well. That's going to be the skin, right? That's going to be on the sides. Right. So there's all this resistance, and you would think, and the thought before we really could prove in 1988 that underwater's worked is there's so much more resistance because of it's all around you. Yeah. And when I swim, my arm is out of the water. Air is less resistance than the water. Therefore, if half my body is above the water, I'm going to have less resistance.
Right.
It doesn't work out that way though.
No.
This is the sum of the parts is not equal.
Yep.
The individual part, the sum of the parts is not equal to the whole, right?
Yep.
And so what ends up happening, and I did some research on this a couple of years ago, is that you're in a streamline, so you're breaking the frontal resistance a lot more efficiently than swimming. Even though in freestyle you can have one arm forward and almost a streamline as you go through, there's a lot more resistance on your shoulder, your head, and other body parts. So you break the frontal resistance.
Right.
You're tight underneath, and with the suits that we have, you really break the frictional resistance on the body, and your positional resistance is down as well. So now you go to the back and you say, okay, so now I have the eddy and the terminal resistance. Well, what happens there? What we found, this is the crazy part, is when you start, so I always teach big kick to small kick, right? As you come off the wall. When you create the big kick, it creates almost like, you got to think of it like a ball or a bubble. I think a ball is better. It
Yeah.
resists the bubble. So when you kick down, you create this bubble. And as you kick, you're creating more bubbles behind you. And those bubbles are still.
Yeah.
And so you actually get to push off the bubble or the ball that's behind you as you go forward. But freestyle, because you chop the water, you don't create this resistance ball that's behind you. And so you don't get to push off, and it's less efficient.
Yep.
Which again goes back to your science in the 1980s. We didn't have that, but now we do. So if you're kicking underwater, if you're a coach teaching it or an athlete learning it, think about, how can I create a bigger ball that I can push off of? And the balls get smaller as I get faster. And I'm creating more resistance that I can push off of instead of resistance that sucks me backwards. It's absolutely phenomenal to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, the proof is, I think, again, we're at the point where we've got such good video footage
Yes.
from so many races, and it's not just above anymore. We've got below, we've got in the middle, that you can see from all different angles what it looks like. And, I challenge everyone, like I said before, to look at the different body types and how they do exactly what you just said, Matt, that like, look at how big or how small their kicks are.
Right.
Look at what their core is even doing, because that kick comes from your core. You've got to be able to move that center part of yourself to get the kick going. And there are a lot of female swimmers, especially, that are very flexible, and you can see.
Oh my God. Yes, absolutely.
It's beautiful. And you think that it looks like they're going slow, and then they pop up a body length or half a body length ahead of everyone.
Right.
Because just the analogy you use, they found that ball behind them to help them almost push off to get where they need to go.
Right. And it's less energy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting too, because this goes back to something as a coach that I say a lot: flexibility. We talk about, as coaches, why flexibility is so important in swimming.
Right.
And with a dolphin kick, if you can't move your ankles a good amount of, up and down movement, those dolphin kicks are a lot harder.
Yes.
Because you're really stiff. You want to be able to flex your ankles and flex your entire body as much as you can. So flexibility is really key in a great dolphin kick too, that you'll see a lot of swimmers that the more flexible they are, the better their dolphin kicks are.
Yeah, I mean, we had a swimmer, Mary DeCenza, was at Georgia, world record holder in 2009, and one of the prelims in the 200 butterfly. Won NCAA's 4 straight years in the 200 butterfly, right? Amazing. We wouldn't let her run in dry land because her ankles were so loose that we thought she was going to fall over and hurt herself.
Yeah.
So everybody would go for like a couple mile run, and we're like, hey, just stay here and, do this. And the first time they did, I'm like, what are we doing? They're like, yeah, it's hard on her ankles to run. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense because she was so good and so flexible at that butterflyer. And also the difference between a breaststroke and a butterflyer, one indicator is the flexibility of the ankles. Because butterflyers can't get it's getting the ankles in the right position and holding that position for both strokes, I think, is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, you look at all this data and you're going and you're saying, okay, so I have a short swimmer. That means they should do it this way. Or I have a tall swimmer and they should do it this way, because if I look at Phelps and he has a similar, throw that out.
Nope.
Throw that out the window. There's not, and that's where I think there's a beauty to sport, is that you're constantly figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah.
And it's the term that I like to use is, it's probably like an SAT term, is idiosyncratic. It's like it's idiosyncratic means based upon the individual.
Yep.
It's what you do as an individual that works best for you. I can take four swimmers that are the same height and similar weight and similar build, and depending on their flexibility or their lung
Yep.
capacity or all of these different factors that go into it, I can say, okay, let's really go, this is what you need to do. And it's only by trial and experiment and talking to your swimmer and saying, how did that feel? All right,
Yeah.
let's time you off the wall. I had one swimmer that she was constantly just really small kicks, but she was snapping them and she could move.
Yeah.
Whereas I had another swimmer similar size, needed to have a good first kick to create that ball, and then she could spring forward and go. So even though I like to teach big first kick and get smaller as you go, some need to be small, some need to be big. You watch the Olympics, some were just huge kicks the whole time, trying to get accelerate out of the underneath the water and out of the wakes.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no one size fits all, but
Yep.
there's also not, if you're a small stature person, it fits, or if you're an extra large person, it fits, like our clothes. There's different companies that we go to buy different types of shoes or different types of shirts, depending on how they fit and what kind of cut they are. The same way we have to think about our swimmers. Yes, we need to work on this, but we need to work on it based upon the differentiation between what this swimmer can and cannot do, their strengths and weaknesses, and we move. So like in physical education, we try to group people, and in swimming, we try to group people based upon similar needs, depending on what the workout is.
Right.
Keep working those and working with the athlete on their technique that works best for them.
And, I want to mention this because this is something that, as an age group coach, I watched over and over again when dolphin kicks really became a big thing, was that coaches for our youngest group of swimmers were, and I still have unfortunately witnessed coaches doing this, telling a 6, 7, 8 year old that they're required to do, I want to think of one of the math
Just
equations.
stop there. As soon as you said required, I'm like, they're 8.
Yes. So it's like you need to do the half the amount of your age of dolphin kicks off of the wall, was
Okay.
one that I have heard.
Okay. Interesting.
Okay. Again, think about what you just said. No, I had kids that were told this, you know, by summer league coaches and things, and then they'd come back to me and I'd watch them do it, and they'd be like, literally going nowhere, just
Doing their kicks.
right?
Doing their kicks.
Nothing was coming out of it. They were just doing it because someone had told them that, like, oh, you need to do half of your age. That is not younger kids. We need to be teaching them the very basics of how a dolphin kicks works.
Right.
When you go into giving them some kind of general example, just like you explained, of saying half of your age, that does not work for every kid,
Right.
especially an 8 and under. That
Right.
is not, do not do that. You have to look at the swimmers individually. I have had 6-year-olds that, again, somehow they are natural butterflyers and they could do dolphin kicks all day. You teach
Right.
them the first time and they were amazing at them. And then there were other ones who they just could not get it down
Right.
yet. So if you are generalizing something to a group at that level, especially younger kids, it is making it to where that is something that will be ingrained in their minds for the rest of their lives, instead
Right.
of
That's true.
saying, let's start with 2 dolphin kicks.
Right.
Let's start with just working on, doing fish kicks. So again, this is a good example for parents and swimmers and coaches that don't know what fish kick is. This is really the reason why fish kick became such a big drill that we all do,
What is
is
fish kick? I haven't even heard of this. Heard it
when
by a
you
different
come.
name.
So this is a good example of, again, the difference between, different coaches and how you were taught. So fish kick is just dolphin kick on your side, but
Okay, yeah.
right.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
I call it fish kick, but if, always start my younger kids doing fish kick first, because I use the analogy, you need to try and make your body an S. So
Right,
like drawing an S with your body, and that you're kicking lane line to lane line.
right,
So again, imagine if this is a swimmer and this is their body, that we're this way and they're kicking like this down the lane. So that progresses them to, again, feel their core, feel what we've been talking about, that, you're having to move water back and forth. Start simple with little kids like that.
right,
They can understand that, but I always think as coaches we should stay on the cautionary side of using things like even a lane marker at that age, saying you need to get out, the red marker, or you need to get out to the halfway point,
right.
because just as you use the example, every swimmer is different. Every kid's, physical makeup is different. So as little kids, you start at the very, very
Bare bottom.
bottom. Don't be using Michael Phelps as an example. Do
Right.
not, because you'll have kids that will take that literally and stay underwater and go nowhere.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely they will. They won't go anywhere at all. And they're and
Yeah,
and then you come back and like you could have done this, like, but the rule is, right?
yeah.
Especially the rule followers are they'll do exactly what you ask them to do. I think that it's also working with the athlete and giving them ideas. The one thing that I've learned is physiologically,
Mhm.
kids that are like under 10, definitely,
Yeah,
11 some, and some even up to 12, but usually between 10 and 11 years old is the first time that an athlete can think hypothetically.
yeah,
So if you go to an 8-year-old, a 9-year-old, even a 10-year-old and say, "What do you think would happen if you kicked more underwater?" They're guessing.
yeah,
We know from research they can't do a hypothetical. It's not there. So like, if you've been talking about going farther underwater, and then you say, so if we want to go farther, what do you think would happen if you gave more dolphin kicks underwater? They'll say you go farther, because they've learned from the cues of what you've been talking about
mhm,
that happens. So do an experiment, have fun with it. I think this is always fun. My wife is like, stop experimenting on the kids. But I'll come up to my son all the time. I'm like, what do you think would happen if, and I give him a hypothetical, if you throw a ball higher in the air? The
yep,
answer he'll give is it goes higher,
right,
because you said higher. He won't say, oh, the trajectory, or what if I threw it higher at the same speed? What, he doesn't know. But, and this is where you become a better coach, experiment with them.
yep,
Let them figure it out through physical experiment,
right,
and you'll learn more about the athlete, and they'll learn more about the sport and themselves, and then they have the answer, not what they think you want to hear.
yep,
And just do that. Just have them push off the wall and say, we're all going to do 2 dolphin kicks really, really big. How far do you go? Let's see who can go the farthest.
yep,
Well, now they're going to start experimenting. The third or fourth round, I'm going to push off the wall and glide. Then one big kick, and then I'm going to wait, and then another big kick instead of right away. Okay, well, let's bring those closer together. Now you're teaching instead of hypothetical, hey, you need to do 2 kicks.
right,
Now you're teaching how to do those 2 kicks.
yep,
Have them streamline with their hands together. Have them streamline in an X, which goes farther. Why? And you really use those formative years to experiment, and then they're having more fun at practice. So you
yes,
warm them up, you give them a kick set, you get them tired. You still have 35 minutes left, 40
right,
minutes left. Now let's do 10 or 15 minutes of experiment technique that you come up with. Can be the same experiment for a week, but
yep,
now we're going to experiment, and then we're going to use it, and then we're going to warm down with a relay.
yeah,
They'll love it because they want to learn.
yep,
Then when you get 11, 12, 13, 14, and you're starting up into age group swimming for real, and they're trying for states, and they're trying for sectionals, and they're trying to build up into being a senior swimmer, now you can start talking to them because they can think about hypothetical. Give me an
Right.
example whenever you did this. How did that work out for you? How did that feel? Now you can start teaching within the sets instead
Yep.
of creating an experimental set. And I find that to be highly successful for age group
Yeah.
coaches.
Yeah, definitely. And I this is why we do this podcast, right? Is because as a younger coach, when I was out of college, starting out as an age group coach, I think so many age group coaches use analogies and use material that is not meant for younger
Right.
swimmers.
Yes.
And so coaches, please, talk to those age group coaches that are age group coaches. Don't go and get your material from Bob Bowman, right? Like there's tiny things that you can use,
Right.
but that's not what 8-year-olds should be doing.
Right.
It is exactly what you said. It's trial and error. It's teaching them really just the mechanics of swimming through experimenting and succeeding and failure and taking your time to do that, not rushing through the process and watching the slow development of them. And I wish when I had been 21 years old, that I had a great age group coach that I could have stood on the deck with
Right.
and then be like, no, your college thought process of
Your
swimming,
college words you keep using, like
yes,
idiosyncratic, is not going to work
is
here.
not going to work for this 7-year-old who, and I know, again, so many young coaches run into that they're like, they get frustrated because they're like, I don't even know, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to coach this? And so this is part of it, is the start just simple with it,
Yes.
and start from the real groundwork, and don't expect them to be going 15 yards, 15 meters, wherever, whatever pool you're at a young age. They have to develop to get there.
Right.
And, but swimmers, the biggest thing with this is, number one, we very much mean it when we say flexibility is key from a young
Yes.
age. It really is. Um, we're lucky that we live in an age where yoga is a big thing.
Right.
And every swimmer now, yoga is a part in some way, or Pilates,
Right.
their exercise regimen. And it is because swimmers need to be flexible. A story that I have, and I tell my swimmers this every single year. When I was younger, I would go to swim camp in Fort Lauderdale at the Swimming Hall of Fame
Right.
under Jack Nelson.
Right.
And he would always tell all of us, part of our everyday thing was we had to do stretches to the point where we were able to put our hands on the ground. So when you
So that's
bend
straight
over,
leg, bend over,
straight,
put your palms on the ground.
correct, straight
Okay.
leg, bend over, put your palms on the ground. And the reason for that was, the majority of swimming, you have got to have great hip flexors,
Right.
and you need to be able to loosen your body up, your core, your shoulders, everything, to be able to do that. So when you go on a block and you go to lean over, you're not struggling to grab the block.
Right.
You are, so
You're relaxed. You're
you're
actually
relaxed.
relaxed because
It's like,
within the range of motion that you're
correct.
comfortable in. See,
Yes.
it's not about how far can I go with my stretching. It's what do I need to be able to do and be comfortable doing, right?
Yes. Yeah. And, Jack Nelson he taught me, I mean, I think I started going there when I was maybe 9 or 10. And I'm so thankful for it, because it genuinely was probably the first time in my career that I saw someone with this stretching importance before you ever got in the water.
Right.
And it was things like that. And it was a lot before yoga was a thing. It was yoga movements. It was, he used to use these ropes that you would buy, and everybody would put them over. I forget what they were called now, but they were just ropes, and they were all different colors. But it was, doing it over your shoulders and stretching your shoulders and using it with your legs and just stretching your body out and getting to the best of your flexibility that you could.
Right.
And so my whole life, I'm grateful for that because it really did teach me the importance of flexibility. And I think, swimmers, you will see improvements if you start focusing on flexibility. And that comes along with dolphin kicks. The more flexible you are, the looser your hip flexors are, the looser your ankles are, just like the example you gave of that UGA swimmer, the better you're going to be at kicking, the better you're going to be able to utilize your full body and full motion of your body with that flexibility. So again, I think that's something you can start very little to improve your dolphin kicks on is flexibility.
Yeah,
Start.
and the interesting thing there is some people will say, well, the flexibility of the ankles is dependent upon genetics. All flexibility is dependent upon genetics, but you
Yeah.
need to maximize what you have.
Yes,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, so it's not like you're going to be super flexible if you're not going to be super flexible, but you're going to be better than you were. And so
Yeah.
you have to work it. The other thing is breath control. You have
Yes.
to work breath control. You're going to
Yep.
be underwater. You have to
Yeah.
get used to having breath control. One of the interesting parts about breath control is when you're underwater and you feel like you need to breathe, it's not because you need more oxygen, it's because your body's trying to get rid of the carbon dioxide, right?
Right.
That's what that feels like. That's what we know from CPR and other things. So, you've got to be able to resist that, not to a dangerous level, not going 25 completely if you can't, but just knowing I'm going to come off this wall. I'm very efficient now with my underwaters. I'm going to start making sure that at practice I'm getting out and working your breath control, not just in a breath control set like breathe
Right.
every 3, every 5, every 7, or no breathers for a certain amount, but really coming off of every wall and saying, I'm going to set my own goal to be this far. And
Yep.
then maybe after a couple of months, this far, and then getting to the 15-meter mark as much as I can. Can you do it every time? No, but you're setting your own goals for teaching yourself. This is what I need to do to maximize this fifth stroke. I think
Yeah.
that's the other flexibility and breath control are the two biggest ones.
Well, and I like that you brought up breath control because that's something else that I think as swimmers that you need to work on when we say breath control, like you've got to learn what works for you, how to slowly let the air out underwater. The
Yes.
first thing that you will find is, the biggest mistake swimmers make is they come off of the wall, they come off of a turn and immediately let all their air out. And
Yes.
so they don't know how to slowly let the air out as you come up the surface. And every swimmer is different, of how they do this because it depends upon just your entire body makeup, what your lung capacity is. I know some swimmers that literally do, they have to let all of their air out as soon as they come off because it causes them to get stronger with their dolphin kicks. Then I know other ones that it's got to be a very slow let out when they do it. And I don't think a lot of times that swimmers or coaches emphasize that enough of practicing and thinking about, oh, I feel better. I feel less panicky when I let, air out slower, or
Right.
I feel better when I just let it all out and I go.
But
Uh,
again, that goes back to the carbon dioxide. It's the carbon dioxide buildup. So if
mhm.
I hold my breath for 15 meters, it's going to get worse. If I hold my breath for a little bit and let it out slowly, as soon as you start letting it out, your body relaxes because it knows it's
Yep.
getting rid of the thing that it needs to get rid of, the carbon dioxide it needs to get rid of to get the air coming back in. And
Right.
whether you let it all out and then hold on, or you let it out slowly, that again is based on the individual. But again, if you're just holding your breath and not letting any out, you're going to feel that urge to get more oxygen. And if we think I have to get more oxygen, we're going to be off track for what we're trying to do physiologically to do
Yes.
well. I think we need to get to the parents on this as well.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to what we said to the young coaches. There's not a hard, fast rule. And if your child is not getting underwaters, talk to the coach about it because they might be working it, but yet your child doesn't feel comfortable. There is a
Right.
comfort to being under the water, right?
Yes.
When you first teach swim lessons, kids don't like to be under the water because they think I don't have oxygen, I can't breathe. There's can be claustrophobia that goes
Yeah.
along with being underwater. And there's a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety and a lot of feel that has to happen. So if your 8, 10, even 12-year-old is not going very far underwaters, hopefully, I mean, they're probably working on it and working through some of these issues to get there. So if you again give feedback, hey, you should have gone underwater faster. You're better at better at dolphin kick. Well, don't coach. Be the
Yeah.
encourager instead of the critiquer, and talk
Right.
to the coach about it and say, well, and don't tell your kid, well, I'm going to talk to your coach about this, because now there's going to be a fight in your kid's idea of what's going to happen. Just mention, say, hey, how are we doing on underwaters with that? I just noticed they're coming up short. Is there anything at home I can do to help them out with this? That would
Yeah.
be the best advice that I would give.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm gonna tell a parent story on myself again. It's always a constant struggle when you are the coach and the mother. And,
Yes.
um, and you know, Matt, how I've struggled with this. I'm very good at separating this with ED because again, I have an amazing staff that they know I will not coach my daughter, but
Right.
Evie, soccer is her love. And when she really shifted from like doing swim and soccer to like just soccer for a while, when she came back to the pool and where we first noticed this issue, we like to call it Evie soccer syndrome now,
Okay.
is dolphin kicks, because she used to have these amazing dolphin kicks. She was great at them.
Right.
And she came back from just doing soccer, and we realized in her dolphin kicks, and then when she was kicking freestyle, even, the example you gave of those little nice kicks, that she all of a sudden her dolphin kicks, her feet were like this in her dolphin
So her
kicks.
toes are pointing together, her ankles
Her
are apart.
toes were pointed together, and she was like, and there was no flexibility in her core, and she was literally like kicking from her knees, and her feet were like this, and even when she was kicking, it was like this, and one kick was bigger than the other, and all of us coaches were literally would stand on the pool deck and be like, what is happening? Where did this come from? And then we ended up having a swim practice, and then I took her to soccer practice. And I was sitting at soccer practice, and when we get to soccer practice, I'm watching Evie like kick the crap out of these balls all the way halfway across the field. And it hit me that she had been training so much footwork with soccer,
Right.
and they use in soccer, again, because it's a swimming podcast, in soccer they use the inside of their foot to kick the ball, or they're using the outside of their foot, so everything is very inside outside foot. So you're not supposed to kick the ball with your toes at
Right.
all, like ever. So everything is, from that point, and I'm going, oh my gosh, her feet have now trained to be turned in that way instead of pointing her toes and being able to have this movement. She's got this. So the hilarious part of this is that magically Evie was never a brushstroker, and her brushstroke took off
Right.
because her ankle
Because now
flexibility
her flexibility is different.
here instead of here now. And
Inside outside breaststroke instead
yes,
of linear forward and backwards.
yes. So parents, that is the example that I'm giving you of, Evie really did. She had this ankle flexibility, but because she was constantly doing this with soccer, it switched where it was coming from. And we still to this day, I mean, we discovered that over a year ago. And even her swim coach now, like, we've had to put bands on her to try and get her kick back small together and get her just to be able to move her ankles for dolphin kick,
Right.
because she has this outside thing. So, I say this to parents in my advice of, it is those little things that you don't realize as a parent are very natural to kids that they pick up, that a coach may be working on during practice with them, saying, your dolphin kicks are not there yet. Let's only do 2 or 3 off of the wall and get up and go until we get them where they need to be at. Let's
Right.
give it time and work on it. So don't overstep thinking that like, oh, well, my kid should be able to go as far as the other kid next to him in the lane doing dolphin kicks. Well, they might not have that ankle flexibility yet. They might be soccer players who are kicking like this, and
Right, exactly. No, exactly.
you don't realize that, a coach is still working on that, trying to get that movement in. So,
I think it's the comparison game too. I just watched the Olympics, right? My kid should be like an Olympian. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the kid just in the next lane. But again,
right.
at the Olympics, you can see it very easily. The US versus Australia, Australia versus Great Britain, France versus the difference of the swimmers. It wasn't, yeah, there's a commonality within the country because of the way that we train, but at the same time, they're still world class and they're not utilizing their underwaters as much as they do because some swimmers have to, some swimmers
Right.
don't have to, and maybe if
Yep.
they could they would. It's just let your kid develop as the kid needs to develop and relax
Yep.
and just be consistent and you're
Yep.
going to get there.
Yep.
So coaches, think about how you're teaching. Athletes, think about the possibilities, and parents, think about the support that you're giving. And I think everything is going to work out pretty well. So
Definitely.
great. Thanks for the discussion. This was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Yay, Dolphin kicks and fifth stroke.
Yeah, let's go for it. All right. We'll talk later. Whatever platform you're listening to, make sure you subscribe and hit the like button. And if you loved us, leave a review. Also, if you're interested in getting more information from this episode, click the link in the description and we'll send you notes from this episode. Finally, do you have a topic to suggest or want to share your thoughts? Email us at swimedinfo@gmail.com. swimedinfo@gmail.com. Join us next time for a thoughtful discussion about swimming and how coaches, athletes, and parents can improve their performances. Thanks for listening to Swimmed, education for coaches, athletes, and parents.